Okay, we're going. Right, okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this Norfolk Duty to Cooperate meeting on Thursday, the 1st of October 2020. The Strategic Planning Member Forum, our role is to ensure that our legal requirements, for the time being, because it's a white paper, to demonstrate duty to cooperate are met, and by working together, we should do a better job with less cracks between us and saving money along the way. Good. So the first item on the agenda is the annual election of chair. Neenan, can I just resign for a moment and pass to you?
Yeah, so I'm going to open this meeting with the annual election of the chair. So do we have, is the incumbent chair willing to still wish to stand for the next year's chairmanship? John?
I am, if nobody else wants to do it.
Propose John Fuller.
I'll second that.
Any other nominees? No? Okay, can we just have a quick display of hands then to see we're happy with that? Okay then, so I can confirm Councillor Fuller is a chair for the next year for the Strategic Planning Member Forum. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much. Well, I think I just did the introduction. Are there any apologies for absence?
Only from a member perspective, only from Councillor Paul Clausen, but he has sending a sub, I think Councillor Banbridge.
Good. So forgive me, I can't see everyone's video, but I can see there are some names there, so that's fine. So it's good work we do, and I'd like to at this stage go to the minutes of the last meeting. If I look away from the camera, it's because I'm looking on my second screen, you see, so it's all meant to go nice and easy. So for those of us that were there, are we satisfied that the minutes are as the meeting happened? Happy with that? So I've got to look at the, hang on, yeah, it was the 14th of January, wasn't it? Okay, there we are. So I'm not seeing any dissent, so in due course I'll work with Neenan where we can get face to face and to sign those off as true and accurate record. We should just note that the meeting we had planned for April, I think it was cancelled. This is the first opportunity since then. Okay, so the next one is, we're delighted to have Robin Price from Waters Resources. You see, in the old days, we would have said, well, that's Anglian Water. But of course, that's not how it is nowadays. You've got Suffolk and Essex Water, as I know them. Graham, what are they called nowadays? They're called something else now, aren't they, in Yarmouth?
Anglian Water. Essex and Suffolk. Anglian, take your pick.
Yeah, that's it. So this is the umbrella body for water in its entirety. And whilst I think we understand that Anglian Water are by far the largest provider, others are available, as it says in the tin. So, Robin, you last came to us, I think it was about a year ago, and we did ask you to come back just to give us an update, not just on the way that water and sewage works more generally in Norfolk, but particularly in our role as planning authorities, so we can sort of consult with you and you with us about where there may be water shortages, and when we do plan development, even large-scale development, what the issues are. And if I may just kick off where we concluded last time, I think you put the frighteners on us, and we concluded that it might be sensible at one stage in the next 10 to 20 years to consider a new reservoir for Norfolk, because groundwater was becoming limited and we couldn't necessarily rely on surface water from rivers. So I'll just leave that thought hanging and pass to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. So I shall share my screen, if I may, to share some.
A wonderful set of pictures you've got in the background.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, that's the actual background, the family room. Are my slides visible to everybody? Are they okay?
Yeah, we've got those. Well done. Thank you, Robin.
Fantastic, wonderful. So thank you very much indeed, Councillor Fuller, and thank you, Neenan, for getting me here as well with all the instructions. Very, very helpful. So what I'd like to do is, just give you, I will just go back to basics for those that aren't familiar with WRE, just a very brief overview of WRE and how we're doing. But then really importantly, it's what progress have we made. And in particular, I should be focusing on our work to develop a water management strategy and plan for the County of Norfolk. So fantastic engagement from Norfolk County Council, the districts, and New Anglia LAP, and I'll give you an update on kind of where we are with that. So introduce myself, I'm Robin Price, I'm the Managing Director of Water Resources East. I've been in this role for 2 years now, which has flown by. In terms of who are Water Resources East, who and what are Water Resources East? Well, we are one of now 5 regional planning groups operating as part of a national framework for water resources. The days of water company only planning, where water companies produce statutory water resource management plans that just focus on public water supply and cover their own geography, are gone now. We are all working together with all water users. So we are, as regional planning groups, are bringing together all water users, all those that have an interest in the water environment on a much larger geography. And our role essentially is to produce a plan for each of our regions, and then as a national group, we form a regional coordination group to then knit this together into a national picture for how we're going to manage water scarcity and water resources through to the 2050s, 2060s, and indeed beyond, all under the Environment Agency watchful eye through the national framework. Our timescales are that we will publish this plan finally in the final version of our plan will be published in September 2023, but a huge amount of work is ongoing at the moment, and the first opportunity that we will get to socialise this plan will be next summer, and we will iterate throughout the year, and we will take more and more feedback on board through to our publication of our draft plan in 2022 and the final plan in 2023. What are we trying to do? So what is this regional plan going to cover? Well, we're here to co-create a single multi-sector plan for long-term water management over the entirety of eastern England. As you saw, our geography was very large. We started at the South Humber Bank, we go down to the Hertfordshire border, across to Essex, and across through Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire. So it's a very big geography. And what we're essentially trying to do is firstly increase the level of resilience for all water sectors, for water resources. We all need to sleep a little bit sounder in our beds. As I say, I put the frighteners up to you last time. I'm afraid I'm not going to reassure you in any great certainty today. I'm afraid that the news is still there is a big mountain to climb. But again, we're here to increase the level of resilience through our planning process. We want to join up the worlds of water quality, flood risk, and river flows with water resources. Really importantly for this group, we want to make sure that water isn't a barrier to economic development in the region, and that goes from a flood risk point of view, but also from a water resources point of view. We want to make sure that we can help this region and this county and this region realise its economic ambition. Really importantly, throughout all this process, we've also got to help the region and the counties meet their environmental ambitions as well. And again, sometimes there can be those two things can jar, but we want to make sure that we understand both and we can plan for both of those. We want to think about how we fund the work we've got to do, the solutions we will come up with, and importantly, anything we do has got to represent the best value for the region, rather than just a least cost solution for a water company or a least cost solution for agriculture or for local authority or whatever. So, and really importantly, co-creating the water-related elements of other regional strategies, making sure we can focus on how we playing our part in climate change mitigation, adaptation, net zero ambition, and all of this needs to be written up, because what we want to do is really change the policy landscape, and the only way we can do that, we think, is to make sure that everything is academically very rigorous. We're providing rigorous evidence to policymakers. So how do we work? Very briefly, so we were, WRE was formed back in 2014 as an Anglian Water project. In 2018, WRE, the leadership group sitting around WRE, decided that this could not be delivered by, shouldn't be delivered by Anglian Water or indeed by the water sector. This needed to be delivered by an independent body. So in last summer, 2019, we became an independent, not-for-profit company limited by guarantee based at the UEA, which is great. We wanted to be associated associated with a centre of academic excellence. We are a very small team. Our chairman is Henry Cater, who is a well-known Norfolk figure. He's still our chairman, which is fantastic. And we are a small team. We have a multi-sector board of directors, a strategic advisory group, and a consultation group forming our governance. In terms of our board, we have the 5 water companies that have a presence in our region. We have the NFU, the CLA, we have the Rivers Trust representing the catchment-based approach, the RSPB representing the Wildlife and Countryside Link. We have Norfolk, Suffolk, Lincolnshire and Essex County Councils sitting on board. We have the Broads Authority, the Drainage Authority, Association of Drainage Authorities and RWE. But really excitingly, we have an enormous membership body now. So many of the district councils, the borough councils in Norfolk are now individual members. The county council are members. But really importantly, we've got a very diverse group of members, because what we want to do, a really important word for us in describing our plan, is we are co-creating this plan through engagement and collective decision making. The plan that we develop will belong to Breckland District Council as much as it does Kingsley and IDB or the Thetford River Group or Essex and Suffolk Water or McCain Foods. This truly will be a co-created, or the Royal Horticultural Society who have joined us in the last fortnight. This will be a co-owned plan, and I want everybody. I'd like to double this membership if I can, because what I don't want to do is publish a plan next summer or the summer afterwards and somebody saying, oh, if only you'd kind of got in touch with us, we could have really helped, or we had some information that would have really helped. So this will not be a traditional, here's a plan, here's a consultation process, you've got 6 working weeks and here's your mailbox to send your comments back in and we'll plough through those. We want there to be no surprises in this plan. So really delighted. And there are just a couple of districts who I'd just love to have you as individual members of WRE so we can get you in the room. You are on the list, you will be followed up, I'll be following up with you.
Name and shame them.
So we have Kings Lynn, we have Norfolk, we have Breckland, we don't have Norwich City, we don't have South Norfolk, and we don't have Broadland yet. So I'll send you a picture, I'll send you a letter. It costs nothing to join, I should say, costs nothing to join. All we need is a letter saying you give us £1 if we go bust. That's it. So it just gets you in the room. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? As you mentioned, Councillor Fuller, before I scared you last time. Yeah, the region now, 85% of the water in our region is used for public water supply. Probably comes as no surprise, but actually 15% of the water is used for non-public water supply. And looking nationally, this is the largest figure. And 10% of the water in this region, across the whole region, is used to irrigate crops and then to produce and manufacture the food and drink which is associated with that. So agri-food is a huge sector, but we mustn't forget the energy sector as well is a big player. And looking forward to our region in the 2050s, these numbers are the potential deficits, the potential additional amount of water that we will need in this region. The big drivers are, of course, climate change, sustainability reductions as we work to return water to the environment, big growth ambitions, drought resilience, decarbonisation, I should mention hydrogen in a moment, and also future agricultural growth. 2 things are very terrifying about those numbers. The first thing is the numbers. So those are million litres per day, megalitres per day. So even our best case scenario is 531 additional megalitres a day will be needed by the 2050s. Some perspective about that, that's enough to provide about drinking water for about 1.5 million, 1.8 million customers. So that's the additional water need. And that's the best case scenario. So the other terrifying thing is that actually the higher number is 1,656, and the other thing is the delta, the difference between those 2 numbers. So we've got a lot of work to do as WRE to close the gap on those numbers and get some certainty around them. But yeah, the future in terms of the additional water need for this region is enormous. So what's our strategy to kind of develop the plan and to close some of that gap? Well, the first thing we've got to do is make sure that we can all put our hands on our hearts and say that we are being as efficient with water as we can possibly be. So we are looking here, the water companies have fantastic water efficiency programs. There's lots of things on the telly this week around leaky loos, leaking 400 litres of water per day. So this is all very, very relevant as we understand, what can we do to reduce, for example, domestic domestic demand. But again, we want to make sure, we want to identify, those irrigators, those food producers. Norwich Golf Club, I'm told, is an absolute national exemplar for kind of water efficiency in the way it manages its greens. Where are the power stations? Where are the industrial users who are using water? Very proud of what they're doing with water, and how can we shine a light on the art of the possible? So why are these organisations taking real care with their water supply, and what are the mechanisms that we can encourage others to do that? We absolutely need to store more water in the landscape, and I will be mentioning this reservoir again in a moment, but again, we need more reservoirs. We need to store more water. We have swung from the wettest February on record to the driest May on record. Where's all that water gone between February and May? Well, it's been pumped into the sea, and the reason it's been pumped into the sea is there's nowhere useful to put it, unfortunately. The only useful place for our IDBs, for the Environment Agency, to do the fantastic job of getting that water, that excess water, away from homes, livelihoods, businesses, fields, is to pump it into the sea. So we absolutely want to promote the need for additional storage of water in the landscape, link up the worlds of flood risk and water scarcity. And this is on farm reservoirs. This is smaller gravel pits, gravel workings, maybe not so relevant for the county of Norfolk, but elsewhere. But also, really importantly, we want some big landscape scale reservoirs in our region. We're then going to move water around. So we want to move water from areas of surplus to areas of deficit. And again, we want to think around how we can use open water channels. So we are blessed with networks of a myriad of IDB assets, of water courses, of streams, of rivers. How do we move water in a different way? Again, linking up with flood risk. How do we kind of replumb parts of our region? Again, because this gives flood risk benefits, but it creates habitats, it creates leisure, tourism opportunities. And it's much nicer to go for a walk along a stream or a riverbank or a canal than it is to walk along a plastic pipe that's buried 8 feet below your feet. So there are lots of well-being opportunities for connecting us all with open water channels. Really importantly for the county of Norfolk and other similar counties, we've got to link land and water. The way land is used has a fundamental impact on the way that water is managed. So again, we are very interested in environmental land management schemes. How can farmers and landowners be paid to be rewarded to deliver water-related ecosystem services, as well as, or instead of, indeed, growing food? So what are the opportunities to recharge groundwater through woodlands, through wetlands? How can we slow the flow of water by landscape scale changes to hold water back within catchments and let it be released at the right time and the right place? And then what are the opportunities to capture peak flows, to store, to trade water, to share water, because water is a commodity that many people rely on. We've really got to understand where abstraction is having a detrimental impact on the environment, and the if you like, the national hotspot for this absolutely is within North Norfolk, is within the Broads, the Ant Valley, the Antrim Thurn, the pressures on abstraction, but also the pressures to grow food. Our chalk stream landscapes are very precious. So again, what we want to do is, what are the options which enable environmental restoration and enhancement, but which mean that we can still grow food, we can still accommodate our growth ambition. So how again, truly a cake and eat position, cake and eat it position, how can we achieve all of this is a key part of our strategy. We've got to think around alternative sources of water for our region. So I've mentioned, let's not pump all that water out to sea. Let's grab some of that lovely fresh water, put it in some useful places and use it when we need it. But also, we're surrounded by the coast. So what are the opportunities around desalination? And here brings a real opportunity to link up with the energy sector. One of the big drivers I mentioned before, you saw on the slide before, is the move to decarbonise and to have clean growth and to use hydrogen as a future fuel for transport and domestic heating. So could there be a day when actually energy companies who are producing hydrogen as part of the decarbonisation agenda, using offshore renewable energy to fuel these desal plants, they are, it's energy companies who are building desal plants, and on 330 days a year they're producing hydrogen, they're producing fuel. But on those days when perhaps we don't need, when our heating isn't on in the summer months, when actually we need more water, could those desalination plants be providing, topping up irrigation reservoirs, or watering crops, or producing food or producing additional public water for public water supply. So again, the energy and the water worlds need to come together in a very different way. And what are the opportunities around sewage effluent to recycle? We've got a fantastic example, a national exemplar in the county in Inglesthorpe of a wetland which is treating using nature-based solutions to take sewage effluent, to treat it to a very, very high standard, to then be returned to the environment. Well, could some of that water, when there's plenty of flow in the environment, be used to irrigate crops as part of a circular economy thinking? So where can we get new water from for our region, and how can we link up with other sectors and use nature? And of course, we've got to contribute to low carbon strategies and plans, recognizing the climate emergency that we face. So how are we doing this then? So we are. So what are we doing? Where have we kind of moved on since I last spoke to you? Well, we are now developing a strong portfolio of kind of pilot projects and exemplars across our very large region. These are all being externally funded and focused through partnership working to understand the art of the possible. And we're testing different approaches, different partnerships, different scales to see what we can achieve. And of course, water efficiency exemplars, this process to look for water efficiency exemplars is very, very important for us. And again, really, really keen to work with local authorities around local plans, and particularly understand the water efficiency standards that you are driving forward in your plans. We would not build an energy inefficient home. We wouldn't build a house without lagging in the loft. So why are we still building houses that don't have rainwater harvesting systems or water efficient plumbing or water efficient white goods or whatever? So again, really keen to work with all local authorities around that exemplary approach to water efficiency in building. We're really keen to engage with communities. So what does an exemplary community look like? I'm sat here in a small village in Cambridgeshire this afternoon. So again, how could my village, the village of Abbots Ripton, become an exemplar for water efficiency? Could we all be using less than 100 litres per head per day? We've got lovely RHS approved water efficient gardens. We wouldn't dream of putting the wrong thing down the kitchen sink on Christmas Day. We're all citizen scientists who walk our riverbanks of an evening collecting data. All of our buildings, our parish plans, our exemplars are really water focused, and all our buildings are exemplars. And we're working with Community Action Norfolk and their equivalents in other counties to think around what an exemplary community might look like. At massive scale, from one end of the scale to the other, we are looking right the way across the fens. So we are looking at a fenland adaptation strategy. How can we link the worlds of flood risk with new reservoirs, with peat restoration, with economic regeneration? How can we identify? So taking Cambridgeshire, for example, if I can just step back over the border closer to home, looking at places like Wisbech, where then the A47, so where some large infrastructure projects can't happen because, and therefore economic development can't happen because of water. Water is a problem, largely flooding in that part of the world. So again, how can we link flood risk with water management? So let's take some of that flood risk, let's build new reservoirs, let's have an opportunity, and let's see if we can, create kind of economic prosperity and kind of levelling up across certain parts of our landscape. Again, really, really important in the fens is carbon sequestration, and 50% of Cambridgeshire's CO2 emissions come from desiccated peat that is being ploughed and used to grow food. So really important. If I can get you to focus on the right hand side of the diagram, which is a reservoir somewhere between Kings Lynn and Ely, this links us into the work we want to do in Norfolk. So a Norfolk water management plan. And again, front and centre of this is the potential for a new reservoir somewhere in the Ouse Washes, somewhere between Kings Lynn, somewhere on the Cambridge-Norfolk border. This new reservoir would be filled via flood water. So if we take the Ouse Washes, they fill up. As many of you will have got the train from Peterborough to Ely in February, you put miles and miles of standing water, and all that water is then drained down in the spring and thrown into the sea. What a waste of lovely fresh water that we could do something more useful with. So again, we want to think around how we could grab that water and store it and use it. This gives us an opportunity to then think around repurposing of the River Wensum, for example, a very precious, fragile chalk stream that provides 50 million litres of water a day for the city of Norwich, drinking water and surrounding areas. So again, what can we do to bring different sources of water that then give some of that water across the chalk stream landscape and the Broads back to the environment or back to other users to enable growth? What are the opportunities around Bacton, around Kings Lynn Power Station, Lowestoft, Great Yarmouth, around power stations for hydrogen? How can we, I mentioned hydrogen and the need to producing this additional water to meet the decarbonisation agenda, to link to the offshore agenda. What can we do to influence the way that water is abstracted in the Broads, in East Suffolk, further down the coast, around what is the live information we need from those catchments to help us make choices about how much water is available there today and who has access to it. How can we understand, as I say, really importantly, understand the region's economic ambition in terms of housing growth, the type of houses that are going to be built, where the houses can be built, where is a sensible place to put those houses, and then really importantly, how can we understand what the environmental ambition for the region is, working with a whole raft of environmental actors. So this is what we are looking to do with a Norfolk Water Management Plan, is pull all of this together. Really excitingly, what we're looking to do here is use international best practice around the role of nature-based solutions. So we are teaming up with an organisation called the Nature Conservancy to understand how can we develop a water fund for the county of Norfolk. So again, what this is looking to do is, rather than trying to fund, here's a £50,000 project in the Broads, here's a £100,000 project on the River Stiffkey, here's something else. How can we aggregate all of the investment in nature-based solutions for the county into a much larger single investable proposition, which can then go to market? And this is something that the TNC have used to solve New York's water problems, Quito, Bogota, South Africa. They've actually used this mechanism to leverage significant amounts of finance to invest in nature-based solutions, and we want to set Norfolk as an exemplar for kind of forwarding nature-based solutions. And then this will inform how big the desal plants need to be, how big the reservoir needs to be. So let's see what we can achieve with nature first, and then let's see, we will need some of this grey infrastructure, but how big does that need to be once we've done everything we can with nature? So hoping to bring some international best practice, and this will be one of two European pilots. The other one will be Cordoba in Spain, and the other one will be Norfolk, which would be fantastic. Put Norfolk on the map. Timelines for this are we hopefully between now, if we get the green light for this, we will develop some governance, get the right people in the room to actually kind of govern this sort of thing. We'll continue to understand some of the data. What is the Norfolk specific data in terms of future demands? We've already started mapping all of the environmental projects that are going on with all of the environmental NGOs, the Broads Authority and others, and the County Council as well, through the Ponds project, for example. Next summer, we'll start to think around what's the long list of options, of things, of infrastructure options that we can come forward with. We'll then work through to the summer of 2022 to start to aggregate some of these, put a water fund in place, and then really develop an investment programme to help us meet the needs moving forward. That, Councillor Fuller, is me. So there are my contact details. You can find out lots more on our website. We've published a lot of this information now. So we have a good website. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, and a website, and there are my contact details. And I'd be delighted to take any questions if I've allowed any time in my slot for that. Thank you very much.
Crikey, well, I think you speak even faster than I do. Right, okay, so let's just pull some bones out of that. I mean, clearly, we're here not just because this is an interesting thing. We've all got a drink, because we're land use planners. So I suppose we ought to address our questions to that sort of planning issue. I mean, number one, there is a way in which we can help reduce demand, but there's only so far you can go. I mean, I hate those baths that pinch in the middle. I'm thin enough. Mind you, having said that, 6 months on lockdown, even I'm struggling to get into the bath. So I think that there's a balance to be drawn between imposing low water showers, low flush things, which are good in themselves, but you can only take you so far. We've got to either increase supply, either with grey water in-house capture, rainwater capture, or doing a dirty great big reservoir. How big would this reservoir near Lakenheath-ish? Wasn't quite sure, or Outwell, or wherever it is. How big would it have to be to meet those excess needs of the three counties? Presumably close to the Ouse, because that's where you divert it in Denver Sluice and places like that. How big would it have to be?
And it's a good question, John, and we don't have the answer to that because there are a number of uncertainties around. We need to understand the future water needs, and this reservoir would also probably supply south into Cambridge to relieve some of the pressure around the chalk streams in Cambridge. This would also provide resilience for the county of Essex as well, because a third of the water for Essex comes from the county of Norfolk via Denver. So again, these are the conversations we've got to have. And again, this is some of the opportunities around what can we achieve with nature. Just to your point around water efficiency, the National Infrastructure Commission have looked at this on a national scale. And their view is that a third of water deficits will be met by water efficiency, a third by leakage control through water companies, but actually a third will be needed through new infrastructure. So there is no doubt that we will need new infrastructure for water. Demand management will only take us so far. I agree with you, John.
Okay, so look, I asked some quick questions. Gordon, you've just put yourself back on screen. Presumably you want to ask a question, so I'm going to come to you.
Well, if you're hearing me, I don't know how I did that. But I will. I've been interested in this all along. When I was first elected a councillor nearly 18 years ago, my first job was I had to go on an IDB. So I've taken an interest over those 18 years, and I've had connections with water resources since 2014 and have promoted it in Breckland. Hence, we are members, I hope.
You are, yep.
A question that I'd like to ask, in the EDP today, there's a problem apparently in North Norfolk and Sculthorpe, where the wetlands area there is flooded. Now, you might say a wetlands area is being flooded is okay, but it's flooded too much. And the manager there is blaming the Environment Agency because of what they're doing on the rivers. What I see on our rivers is they're not being maintained. They hold now much less water than I believe they did 25 or 50 years ago. And isn't this something that we need to get to grips with? But the Environment Agency seem to like fur, fin and feather better than they do human answers to the problem.
So I'm not going to criticise the Environment Agency. I'm looking at a picture of Keith Morris here. I may bring Keith, and I may bring Keith in if I may. Keith, get ready to unmute, my friend. We've got to look at all of this. We've got to look at how rivers are operated, how drainage boards. We've got to look at strategies for all of this. We've got to move water in a different way around the region. It is not done in as efficient a way as it can possibly be. So all of that goes into the mix, Gordon, and we need kind of local intelligence, local stories of where there are pinch points and issues that we can bring through. Did you want to say anything, Keith, just to add to that at all?
No, I agree with it. I mean, I made a note of the comment to make a call after we finished speaking. I haven't seen the EDP today, but I think this is this particular site's been affected before. I seem to have a recollection, Councillor Bambridge, I'm not sure if I'm right. Sometime in January, was there another occurrence? I'm not sure what resulted following that occurrence, but I'm quite intrigued. Obviously, there is a number of people who are responsible for maintaining rivers, obviously where they're designated as ordinary watercourses, as you well know from your work on the IDB, there's our responsibility. But certainly that particular example is good to raise. As I say, I haven't seen the EDP today. I'll have another little look. And I seem to recall this happening earlier this year, early in January. So I don't know what was the result of any conversations that took place there, but it is a valid point. Obviously, the whole point of rivers is to carry water, amongst other things, but equally the point of floodplains is to absorb where there is excessive amounts of water. So there may be some particular nuances on that site. I don't know, but I appreciate it being flagged because I'm quite intrigued, because I do have a recollection in a very elderly brain that I carry around that this happened earlier this year as well. So I'd like to think we'd move the conversation forward, but clearly if it's in the paper today, probably not.
Is one reservoir going to be enough?
No, not at all. We need to, and we will need more on-farm reservoirs for irrigation if we can combine that with wetlands, so kind of water is treated through the wetland, and then the last pond is the one that's used for irrigation. So we need farmers to have more, to be storing more water. We need farmers to then share that water, trade that water between each other as well, move water around in a different way. We need to think around, again, near to where I am, the A14 has just been dualed. There are enormous borrow pits sitting alongside there where kind of, what is the best use for those water at the moment? They're just this, you've got this 4 ducts sat on them kind of thing. So what are the opportunities to use, standing water bodies in different ways? So no, Councillor Fuller, we will need one reservoir will not be enough, but how many big ones we need and how many little ones we need, but we've got to store more water in the landscape.
And finally, in the time that's available, because one of the things we do is do building standards and things like that, and I know there could be national rules coming, but what would the marginal extra cost of doing a simple grey water scheme in a house be? So we capture water off the rain and then use that to flush toilets and stuff like that. I mean, is that a 3 or 4 grand or 5 grand extra marginal cost? Because we have to have viability in mind.
Yeah.
So
again, apologies, I don't know. Again, I guess it would depend on the size of the house. It is a relatively marginal cost. There are also ways of just having rainwater harvesting system, but it's also around efficient appliances, efficient showers, efficient toilets, all of that sort of thing. And again, just buying the cheapest toilet system may not be the most water efficient, which is what we're finding from the leaky loos thing that's broken this week through the BBC. So again, it's just there. It's making sure that we use appropriate things with the appropriate standard for water efficiency. And there are organisations like Water Safe, Water Wise, who can provide an awful lot of guidance around that.
Okay. Well, I've replaced the cistern in my loo. It turned out the washer had expanded a bit and it was leaking. So I've done my little bit anyway. Good. Thank you. Well, Robin, thank you very much indeed. That has taken us to time. So I'm very grateful for your forbearance and for putting us on. In my introduction, I said, well, it's really you and Essex and Suffolk Water. But of course, it should be South Norfolk as well. I will take steps, and I see Simon's on the call, so he'll make a marginal note, I know, but also the farmers. And I suppose if Henry Cater is your chairman, it's no surprising that the RHS came in because Nico Bacon is Israeli, so and he's chairman of the RHS.
Indeed.
How Norfolk works. Good. Thank you very much indeed, and we look forward to being one of these national or international exemplars along with Cordoba. And if there's an opportunity for foreign travel when the lockdown finishes, well, perhaps we can all go and have a look. Perfect. Robin, I'm much obliged. Thank you very much indeed.
Very much.
Good. Gordon's booked his plane ticket already. Right, okay, so I see Judith's taken herself off mute, and you're welcome to stay, Robin, if you wish. He's gone. And we're now going to look at the... Okay, you can stay if you wish. If you want to go, we won't think ill of you. Right, Central and Eastern Norfolk Housing Needs Assessment. I must say, I'm a bit perplexed by this one, because the government's announced a new formula. Well, the formula's rubbish, we know that, but there will be a replacement formula of some description. And on that basis, I do wonder why we need to do our own duplicating thing, because the answers won't be the same. But Judith's going to give us the answer. So over to you, Judith.
Thank you. Shall I just take you through the report? It's fairly short and hopefully it won't take too long. So the purpose of the report is to provide with an update on the commissioning of a local housing needs assessment for Central and East Norfolk and tell you where we are at the moment with that. And this issue of the revised standard method does come into play here. I just thought it might be useful to give you a bit of background about what a local housing needs assessment is. So just very briefly, it is an assessment of future housing needs in an area, including the housing need figure, which is a starting point for the local plan housing requirement. Information also on the need for particular tenures, sizes, affordability ranges, and also for specialist housing needs, such as housing for older people or students. This is a government requirement in planning policy, and it's a key local plan evidence study. I just wanted to mention that in 2018, the government introduced this standard method for assessing housing need. And the purpose of that was to simplify the process of assessing need, which up till then had been done through the strategic housing market assessment, the SHMAR, that you probably have all heard of. That's no longer what we refer to. Under the new system, the system is called the local housing needs assessment. But the purpose of the new standard method was to sort of make it a much simpler process, supposedly, and make it more transparent. And also the purpose was to try and encourage delivery of quite a substantial, ambitious housing target per annum of 300,000 per annum. Anyway, so that was introduced, and that sort of is meant to simplify the local housing needs assessment process, because that would take care of the housing need figure within that. But also, as I said, the local housing need assessment also has to address other issues as well, such as tenure sizes, etc. So for Norfolk, we've got an agreement in the current version of the NSPF, which is set out in paragraph 7 of the report, to produce, maintain an assessment of housing needs covering the 3 broad market areas of Great Yarmouth, Central Norfolk and West Norfolk. So that's an important aspect of the NSPF, to make sure we have coverage in terms of our evidence for housing need across the county. Kings Lynn and West Norfolk have fairly recently got a sort of finalised version of their local housing needs assessment, so they haven't got a need to do more, provide more evidence. But the other Norfolk authorities, as it shows in table 1 of the report on the second page of the paper, have got evidence that is of differing ages and sort of detail, and they're all at we're all at different stages in the plan process as well. But you can see from table 1 that some of the evidence goes back to 2013, and the more recent evidence for Central Norfolk is for 2017, and that's already getting out of date. But North Norfolk has got a more recent local housing needs assessment in 2019. But earlier on this year, there was an agreement generally amongst the officer group that we need to look at updating our evidence on housing need, because it was starting to get out of date. So we set up a steering group of all the Norfolk authorities apart from Kings Lynn and West Norfolk, because they don't need to be involved in this. And it involves housing and planning officers, because obviously it's not just important for the local plan process, it's also for development management decisions, and for housing officers need to have the most up-to-date evidence as well to work with. So the steering group's been formed. We've worked on a draft brief, and that's been produced with input from all the authorities, the housing and planning officers. The City Council's involved in is leading on the project management and the procurement side of things. We have, as I say, we've produced a draft brief. The aim has always been to procure the study once we knew that a revised standard method was going to be published at some point, but it was put off for quite a while, and we were waiting for that to be published before then moving ahead with the procurement. That revised method was published in August, and it's subject to a consultation that actually ends today. And that, as it says in the report, this sort of sets out, generates a housing need figure, and that will form part of a binding housing requirement that's a proposal that's within the planning white paper, which is currently also under consultation. So anyway, the impact of the revised housing standard method has been to increase housing needs substantially across the country, and it's led to great variations in housing need. In Norfolk, in particular, need has risen by about 45%, and that's hiding some of the massive fluctuations within the districts within Norfolk. For example, the South Norfolk's need has gone up by about 100%, whereas the cities has gone down by 16%, and there's a range of other fluctuating figures in between. So that has led to a lot of uncertainty, especially because in the national and planning press there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of concern about these figures nationwide. So it's possible that there may be a revision to the revised standard method. So as I said, the consultation ends today. We probably expect a outcome from the consultation in a couple of months' time. That's what we think. So this is very unhelpful for the local plan making process, obviously. But the housing need figure is only one of the aspects of the local housing needs assessment. As I said before, there are other reasons to plan for the right mix of home types and tenures to reflect local needs. So the position we find ourselves at is within the districts who are involved in the steering group. We discussed this last week, and we decided that we need to just take a step back and look at our evidence needs on an individual district basis for both housing and planning purposes, and to have a steering group meeting to discuss those detailed evidence needs and how urgent they are and how they will impact on the timescale for going to procurement. So I think there's still a wish and a need to go forward on a joint basis if we can do that, but we need to discuss that amongst the different districts, and we want to do that soon and try and come to an agreed position. But we may have to have a view with what the outcome of the actual consultation that we're talking about as well. As I say, that we should get some clear feedback in a couple of months' time. So that's the position we're at now. It's not terribly clear, I'm afraid, but that's the position we find ourselves in.
Good. Yes. Well, I think you make some certain factual observations, Judith. I mean, yes, the consultation closes today, and I've had the benefit of some private conversations with the Secretary of State and others, and we've also seen what we've seen in the media and can read what's going on in Parliament and stuff like that. So I wouldn't place too much reliance or expectation that the formula as consulted upon, which is a very simplistic single pass operation, based on two arbitrary numbers, really, the 2014 start point and a wholly unproven guess at how many more houses need to be built to make them affordable, is going to be sustained for the long term. Nevertheless, I think it's fair to say that if currently local plans in aggregate are planning for 250,000 houses and the government's got a manifesto commitment for 300,000, well, there's 20% there. So we're all going to have to plan for 20%. Give or take, plus or minus if you're in AONB, National Park, or anything else. So, but I think your proposition or your supposition that it'd be premature to go out for a market assessment whilst all this is cogitating is probably the correct one. But that's what I think. But Graham, you've just put in the comments. You wanted to say a few words. So, whether from Yarmouth or Norfolk perspective.
Well, I think it's from all district perspectives. We've all got a local development plan that's got a certain number in it that we've put forward as a number that meets the government's criteria. But we have in Great Yarmouth, we have over 3,500 planning permissions agreed that are not being built out. And I think that's the same across the piece. At the end of the day, you can put as many numbers as you like into the figures, but if the developers are not developing them, and the councils are getting punished for not developing, then we're in a very difficult situation, because it's great coming up with an arbitrary number going forward, as you say, from 2014 to whatever's going to happen in the future. But at the end of the day, we've worked over the last 5 years in getting a figure together. It's been agreed by government and it's now going to be changed again. But we have over 3,500 planning applications that have been agreed that are not being built out. And if they were built out, we wouldn't have a shortage in the housing in Great Yarmouth. But if we keep trying to find more places to build on, because the ones that have got planning permission are not being built, we can have planning permissions all over the damn borough without anything being built at all. And the government are going to punish the council for not having enough houses built. So I think the methodology is totally wrong. And basically, if someone's put a planning application in and it isn't built out within 2 years, then we should be able to start charging them rates for it. And that way, that'll incentivize some building, or it'll tell them to stop putting in spurious planning applications.
Go on, Gordon, you're next.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I was going to say more or less exactly the same words that Graham has said. I mean, in Breckland, as you know, our target has been pretty much doubled. We have, as Yarmouth, I think we've got about 5,600 permissions there. That would give us approximately 4 or 5 years for this new target without giving any more permissions at all. But it's ridiculous. Builders will build houses if they can sell them. They're not building them because they can't sell them. There is a limited need use in Breckland, and it's about time the government got itself in gear to look at what's actually happening. And of course, listening to people like your good selves as leaders of councils as to what's needed in a particular area.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got the situation where I think that there needs to be a formula, and the formula we're currently labouring under was clearly sort of a bit of an oddment, in the sense that Cambridge worked out having less houses than they needed. So there was clearly bits, but to start off with this new one is just quite preposterous, really. Look, Judith, I think we all agree there needs to be a formula, but also, and I do accept, within, even if we had a national assessment that was correct, we'd still need to have what's the apportionment of bungalows and flats and everywhere else. So I think we probably need to separate out the gross number of new dwellings required and then think in terms of the distribution and the typology. I mean, I think that is a piece of work which would probably need to be done in any event. But it sounds to me that it's going to be difficult to separate out that important element from the numbers element. And whilst the government is going to determine to give us the numbers, we've just got to keep a watching brief. That's how I see it. I mean, I don't see anyone turning their cameras on to wave fists or put stuff on the chat. I mean, and it's also a significant sum of money. It's 70 grand. And later on in this budget paper, the district councils are being asked to chuck in sort of 10 grand each. That's basically us all in. So if we're going to do this piece of work, I think it's got to be right. And probably now is a bit premature, isn't it? Is that how I read your report, in essence?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've decided we just want to take a step back and review our evidence needs, and I think you're right that you can separate out the issues about the housing need figure from the rest of the evidence that is required, and I think that's what we need to understand, the urgency of both of the other evidence as well. I mean, we'd like to progress this sooner rather than later, but that's something we will discuss with our housing and planning colleagues quite soon, really, and then we can always update you at a later stage.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Graham, yes, come back, please.
Yeah, if I could, please. Yeah, I mean, we've just been through in Great Yarmouth the torturous and tedious task of trying to find housing allocations across our local development plan, getting all the parishes and the villages to buy in and to make sure that we've got everything in the right place for this to come along and say, well, we'll have another look at that then, because it probably doesn't meet the new criteria that's come in. But the fact of the matter is, these things have taken years and years and years to get into any kind of semblance of order. At the moment, is the way I'm looking at it. We've come to an agreement with government as to what the housing requirement is. We're doing Great Yarmouth itself is doing its own local housing needs assessment just to make sure that we're building the right sort of houses in the right place. But we have planning permissions that are not being built out. And to be perfectly honest with you, if we continue down the road of allowing people who want to build an extra house in their back garden a planning permission, but they've got no intention of building that house, it just puts the value of the property up, then we're always going to have an issue where people are going to put land values first because they want to make a profit on the land that they've bought. It needs to increase the value, but they don't actually intend to build it out at all. And yet we're using those figures to say this is meeting our housing needs in Great Yarmouth because this is the planning applications that we've had applied for. So the system isn't working in that sense. There has to be some sort of, I'm not going to say punishment, but some sort of agreement that
incentive.
If you're going to put in a planning application and you're not going to build it out in 2 years' time, when that planning application hasn't started, you should then be starting to get a charge for the planning application, because at some point that should have been coming in as rates and helping pay for local services. So yeah, I just feel that there's an element missing. If I can just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, this is all good points. I'm not sure this is Judith's fault, mind you, but let's have Lana, who's indicated, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm sort of with you. I can't see, this is public money that we're spending on keeping busy whilst the government changes its mind about a really, really key piece of evidence that we need for the puzzle. So I just think we just need to hold back until we find out what that key piece is telling us and then get on with it. So I can't see the point in doing it right now. So that's my contribution. Thanks, Chairman.
I think that's accepted. And Neenan, can I just bring you in as our sort of manager, clerk, chief bottle washer and scraper? You had indicated to me before this meeting that we might have another meeting in the relatively short future. Neenan, can you just remind me when that might be?
Well, I thought I wasn't gonna steal Trevor's thunder on that, and that was just prior information I shared with you. But I think Trevor's going to propose to have a meeting between now and Christmas, so probably around November time. And correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor. It's basically that was mainly dedicated to the new iteration of the planning framework, the NSPF planning framework, and I suppose there is a possibility, since we are having that meeting at some point, then we can potentially have that dedicate some part of the time for that to discuss other items of the agenda, but it is primarily intended to be to discuss and endorse a new iteration of the planning framework, and then that will be the additional one, and then our regular one would resume in January next year.
Okay, so I think the key thing is, let's hold this under review, Judith. We're not making a decision, no, not never, ever, but and there will be opportunities to review this either in a month before Christmas or in January. So with that, and if Lana wants to put her hand down, I think we can probably move on. Are you happy with that, Judith? Well, you
Yes,
can
thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Good. Right. And we've sort of trespassed on the next item, really. Sam Hubbard, come on down. Where are you? Turn your camera on. Here he is. So you're going to lead us by the nose through some of the future reforms, noting, of course, they're only consultations at this stage and a lot could change between now and then.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and share my screen, so just bear with me a second. I have just a short presentation on this item. Where is it? Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we can see that, Sam.
Excellent, great.
Are you the new Adam?
No, not the new Adam. No, the new John Clements. Well, not so new now. I've been at Great Yarmouth now a year. Yeah, I've been at Great Yarmouth now just over a year.
Well done.
Okay, thank you. So, as I said, I'm just going to give a quick presentation on the kind of government's latest proposals for planning reform, which is set out in the planning white paper, which is called Planning for the Future. This is currently, as John's pointed out, subject to consultation, and which closes at the end of this month. So, the white paper, with its very attractive front cover of a development in Newquay, is the government's vision for an entirely new planning system for England. Now, the way it's structured is around what they've called 3 pillars of reform. The first one being planning for development, the second being planning for beautiful and sustainable places, and the third being planning for infrastructure and connected places. I'll cover these very briefly, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the implications for strategic planning, which is what we're all concerned with here. So under Pillar 1, which is all about planning for development, this is where the government introduces its ideas for a new plan-led system to replace the existing system of local plans and development management. So they want a system of, or they're proposing a system of digital and interactive local plans based around 3 different core areas, which would be defined within a plan. First being areas for growth. So these would be similar to, I suppose, our current, within the current system, site allocations. So the areas suitable for what the government is calling maybe substantial development, although it's not quite defined what that means. And in those areas that are designated as growth areas within this new system, they'd have automatic outline planning permission. So all that a developer would need to do after such an area had been designated in a local plan would be to apply for a detailed consent or reserved matter, or some similar to a reserved matters consent. Then you'd have another type of area called a renewal area, which would largely relate to existing built-up areas, existing urban areas, where you may have a number of different sub-areas within that to control different types of use, along with different area-specific policies. And in those areas, there would be a statutory presumption in favour of development in line with the rules that are established in the local plan for those particular areas. And finally, there'd be a protection area. So this area would relate to in areas where there's green belt, also environmental designations such as areas of outstanding natural beauty and potentially the Broads. But also it says that protection areas could include areas of countryside outside of growth and renewal areas. The reforms also say that that local plans in the future shouldn't include lots of generic development management policies like they do now, and instead that the National Planning Policy Framework would be the source of those. So we've touched on the next point a little bit already, but the white paper carries forward proposals for a nationally set housing target of 300,000 homes per annum for the country, and underneath that there would be locally binding targets based on needs and market signals, which is similar to the existing standard methodology. But they're also introducing an element that this new housing target would also take into account constraints within a local area, which is quite interesting because I can see there's probably quite some challenges at a national scale trying to work out a housing target based on constraints, because sometimes constraints can be very, very locally specific. What I'll talk a little bit more on a future slide about is the proposal is also to remove the duty to cooperate, and also the existing tests that a local plan has to meet, the soundness tests, and also remove sustainability appraisal. Pillars 2 and 3. Pillar 2 deals with planning for beautiful and sustainable places. It's putting design at the heart of the planning system, and Pillar 3 is about ensuring the planning system provides infrastructure. Just on Pillar 2, I think the government's very, very keen on reforming the planning system so it delivers better quality design than what we're currently achieving. And some of the ideas behind this is a new national design code, also a new manual for streets for highways design, and underneath that there would be an expectation for local design codes in both local plans and in neighbourhood plans. The government is also continuing with its commitment to have all new streets and developments be tree lined. And another point from this area, which I thought would be worthwhile to make you aware of, is that there was also a proposal for each local authority to have a chief officer for design to really try and upskill and show the importance of design quality to the authority.
It's worth saying that on this Pillar 2, Gail Mayhew, who lives in the Close in Norwich, was one of the 3 commissioners. So, we've got someone who's really on our doorstep, who is either accountable or to blame or to be credited with sort of the emphasis given on Pillar 2.
Thank you. So the Pillar 3, planning for infrastructure, there's some rather significant reforms proposed here, including the removal of Section 106. It would appear to be in its entirety as a tool, and also the community infrastructure levy, and to be replaced with a new infrastructure levy, which would be based on the final value of development. So it was the price paid for that particular unit or commercial unit or house prior to and paid prior to occupancy. So this, of course, does potentially create some issues in that a local authority would only get the contribution just before occupation. So in terms of delivering infrastructure before occupation takes place, there could be an issue. And so what the white paper tries to do to address this is it says that local authorities will be able to borrow against future receipts from the levy. And of course, then there's a risk in that the development doesn't fully complete, or the units aren't occupied, or they sell for a lower value than it was expected. In terms of affordable housing provision, the present that's normally secured through Section 106, and in the future they propose that for that to be secured through this levy as well. Now there's some questions from Councillor LaPlante.
Yes, if I
Thanks,
can just
Fuller.
quickly. Yep. These Section 106 and the SIL money is replaced by new infrastructure. Obviously, there's current. Is there a cut-off time for this or a start time? Because I do know that the SIL has been borrowed against already in certain areas, and that Section 106 monies just sit in a pot ready to be used for the local development. But is there a suggested time for this, and what happens to the money that's already been borrowed against if it's a SIL? Does that just automatically transfer to the infrastructure levy?
The white paper doesn't really go into that level of detail on as to how that transition would work. Presumably, money that's there would stay there and would need to be spent in accordance with existing agreements of a Section 106, and the SIL pots would probably most likely stay there. And I suppose the move from the transition from SIL through to this new infrastructure levy is probably going to be slightly more seamless than the transition from Section 106 to this infrastructure levy, by the very nature that the SIL is similar to the infrastructure levy, where Section 106 is very site specific. So it's going to perhaps be a bit more of a difficult transition for authorities who haven't been used to charging SIL.
Marty Graham makes a good point. You don't want people who've got Section 106 to then reapply, stop what they were doing, and reapply under the new method because it might be cheaper. Because all that'll do is send the pipeline we do have and want to deliver, to his previous point, back to square one again. So I think the government needs to. Well, we've all got to respond to this consultation, and that's certainly going to be one of the big ones that we're going to respond to. But look, I'm conscious, Sam. Look, we're butting up against time, so let's get on to the next slide.
Okay, so yeah, this is perhaps the key bit. It's about implications for strategic planning. As I said, the white paper does propose to abolish the existing duty to cooperate, which is one of the reasons why we sit as a group. So that could also remove the need for a statement of common ground, such as our Norfolk strategic planning framework. But it's probably quite clear that the government hasn't quite made up its mind on what it would replace the duty to cooperate with, because it asks a question of respondents as to what they think could deal with strategic cross-boundary issues for if the duty to cooperate no longer exists. So the white paper itself does reference potential to joint planning arrangements, and also potentially a role for combined authorities, particularly with respect to housing distribution. But of course, what it didn't cover before is that with respect to local plans, the government expects a much shorter timescale of around 30 months to prepare those. So that could create a little bit of a challenge in terms of doing some kind of strategic level planning in terms of distribution of growth, and then also be able to complete your local plan within the 30 months. I think in terms of housing distribution, if there is no kind of strategic measures or no legislative requirements, there could be an issue whereby what would be the incentive for one council that was meeting its own needs to take the needs of the housing needs from another authority. The white paper reinforces the government's intention in the Environment Bill to introduce biodiversity net gain. And I think that's another area where there is a potential need for cross-boundary cooperation. It might be not always possible to deliver biodiversity net gain within sites or even within the districts in which the site is located. So there is probably, again, a need for some cooperation. I think also with the white paper's emphasis on design and the creation of design codes, well, something we have common across Norfolk is a single highway authority in the Norfolk County Council, and they may have some ideas on design specific to highways, which would need to filter into any local design guides. So there's possibly still a role there for collaboration on design at a more county-wide scale. So I think the key messages here is, I suppose, irrespective of what comes out of the planning white paper with respect to strategic planning, the cross-boundary issues we have here in Norfolk and probably elsewhere in the country will not disappear, and we'll still have to consider them in plan making. And I think At present as well, the duty to cooperate also involves other organisations such as infrastructure providers and as well as environmental bodies such as the Environment Agency who are with us today, and others such as Natural England, Historic England and the MMO who we do engage with. So we need to still engage with those, particularly not just on locally specific issues, but also those cross-boundary issues such as coastal management, flood risk, habitat mitigation, and infrastructure. And I think perhaps just a point on habitat mitigation, which is potentially of some concern at the moment, which we may need to raise an issue with, is the removal of Section 106 could create an issue for specific types of habitat mitigation in terms of recreational disturbances. And as you're aware, we are developing proposals across Norfolk for recreational and avoidance mitigation strategy to deal with the strategic cross-boundary issues we have with recreational impact on our designated sites. Now, if contributions need to be made to manage to mitigate recreational disturbance, they would traditionally be done through Section 106, and a community infrastructure levy or a new infrastructure levy may not be best suited for that, particularly where many types of development could often be exempt because of viability issues. So that's a bit of a whirlwind tour of the planning white paper and some of the implications for strategic planning. Just to draw to your attention, I think that's kind of everything I had to say on that point.
Good. Okay. Well, look, that's a canter through. Each of us in our own individual authorities has, insofar as the numbers bit, and I know you haven't really touched the numbers, we covered that on the previous item. But on the policies, we were developing our own responses. I don't think we need to have a Norfolk-wide one. I think really just the recommendation here is just to note this. And just remind us, Sam, what is the closing date? It's 20-something of October, is it, for getting our responses in?
Put me on the spot.
It's something like that. Doesn't matter. It's towards the end of the month, isn't it?
It is. It's towards the end of the month.
I think my personal view, what it's worth, is are we entirely happy with some of the development that's gone on over the last 15 to 20 years? Are we entirely happy it takes 8 years to do a local plan? Are we entirely happy we have to sit through these meetings and listen to me prattle on? Are we entirely millions of pounds spent when a lot of it could be standardised? I think there needs to be some reform, but I've got concerns about to what extent is it going to be any more easier to front load some of this stuff? Is it just going to result in those people with the deepest pockets being able to speculatively afford to do the upfront work, and the smaller mom and pop type builders who really need to have a helping hand, who deliver small and better quality or whatever, just won't get a look in? I think there's some real dilemmas there, and where do we sit with affordable housing and things like that? Good. Natalie's just reminded me it's the 29th of October it closes. So look, we've got a month really to get our thoughts in order. Thank you, Sam, for that canter through. I think you identified most of the issues. The other thing as well is one of the reforms, as I understand it, is that people who live in listed buildings might be able to get double glazing, which seems to be an entirely useful thing to happen. And quite why we've got ourselves in a situation where they can't, as it stands today, is a crazy one. There we are. Thank you for that, Sam. That's brilliant. Right, we're now going to pass. Alan, take yourself off mute and put your camera on, because I think we're now going to listen to you on the Green Infrastructure Recreation Avoidance Mitigation Strategy, which I think Sam has alerted us to, that along with SANGS, may be one of the casualties of a new system where Section 106 isn't really put forward. But over to you.
Well, it's an interesting point, isn't it? And I'll try and kind of give a thought on that at the end. What I wanted to do really today was just give you an update. We talked about this at the January meeting, and there were some kind of pointers as to what members felt comfortable with. You did feel comfortable with some sort of tariff approach, and you wanted, once we had some more final detail, a special presentation. I'll touch on that again at the end. So just trying to update us on what's going on and remind us what we're actually doing. We commissioned a company called Place Services in 2019 to do two things. a county-wide green infrastructure study, and then following on from that, a recreational avoidance and mitigation strategy. You can put impact in there if you want to, but it's recreational avoidance mitigation. So you've got two things there, but it's all in one document. Now, they have been exploring kind of the accessibility to green space for communities across Norfolk and potential new opportunities. But at the same time, trying to understand and put forward proposals to manage visitor impacts on these Natura 2000 or designated sites, whatever you want to call them, because that's a legal requirement that we have to fulfill at the moment. Now, it will be interesting to see if that still follows through, but currently habitat regulations assessment is something that we have to do. But clearly, if you have green infrastructure, you might be distracting people, diverting them from those Natura 2000 sites, which, if we all are quite honest, they're the beautiful sites that we all love to go and visit. The commons, the seaside, the kind of beach habitats that we have, certainly North Norfolk, North Great Yarmouth. So these two pieces of work are really closely interrelated. And what you're trying to do in this is solve the effects of housing growth, but it's those effects which come about because not on the local community necessarily, although some development is near to those Natura 2000 sites. But if you have an increase in population, excuse me, in Norfolk of some 40,000 houses, or whatever it turns out to be, there will be effects in combination of all of those dwellings, of the populations within them, going somewhere else and kind of visiting these pleasant, wonderful, beautiful sites, whatever, and causing potentially likely significant effects, the harm that might be caused by people kind of trampling on things or whatever, dogs being walked, those sorts of things. So within the study, what Place Services have done, they have reviewed the kind of deficits or opportunities that there are across the county. This builds on some work that Norfolk County Council did a couple of years ago. So they've looked at deficiencies and opportunities, and through workshops that they did early on in the study, they've got an idea of where potential opportunity sites might be. Now, these are not commitments that local authorities are bound to, but what they're attempting to show is there capacity within the system or new sites coming forward, perhaps new sites associated with large new developments, those sorts of things. So they've done that study, that bit of the strategy, and they've come to the conclusion, which is helpful for all of us, I am no doubt, that in the county as a whole, there is no need for new county scale solutions to green infrastructure. That doesn't mean to say that no green infrastructure is coming forward, because it is planned to come forward at the district and local level, and it's also planned to come forward as part of some of the large developments that we've got going on. Clearly, we have those local kind of open space requirements. What we're talking about here are perhaps those larger kind of parks or more informal areas that are planned in with some of our much larger developments. People are familiar with those that are coming forward in the Greater Norwich area. We have them in West Norfolk, and I know Breckland does in those developments that are taking place there. So all of that together gives what Place Services say is a kind of a stock of sites and the potential stock of sites. That means, in addition to whatever's going on at the moment, and the county are planning things like long distance paths and such, so is Natural England, we don't need something of a kind of huge scale to cater for Norfolk. So that's a good thing. The next bit is, so what about all these visitors that are coming? Now, we know from the footprint ecology study that we did, I think that was 2016, that people come from all over the country. Well, that's no surprise because we all see them. But aggregate out those people who just come from Norfolk. What is the kind of percentage contribution that they contribute to the overall kind of I'll say damage, I don't mean that in a kind of pejorative way, but the effect of those visitors. So we know where they come from and what they are doing. From that, what Place Services have done is tried to design a method or a response to help reduce that impact. So we come back to the title, impact avoidance and mitigation. So what systems could you put in place to minimize the disruption that those visitors would cause? So they've done that. There's quite an in-depth analysis of all of that. And they've come up with a series of solutions, as I say. So amongst those sort of solutions are some of the obvious thing, more wardening, more helpful direction to people, but also actual physical things that can be done across some of those Natura 2000 sites to direct people in different ways, advice, whatever. So that has been done, and that is costed. So we have a kind of schedule of the items and the costs. Now, having done that, well, it's not rocket science, is it, to work out if all of those new 40,000 houses that aren't built yet or haven't been granted permission and the cost of the scheme, well, you can do a tariff. Now, at the last meeting, members understood the potential tariff that might be being proposed. We are still refining it, but if I say it's in the region, and I think we mentioned this at the last meeting, some couple of £100. That was the kind of ballpark figure that we presented at the last meeting. So what is the kind of output of that? That would pay for, if collected across the county. The reason we're doing this is because the effects of new house building in West Norfolk is felt in North Norfolk. The stuff in North Norfolk is felt in Breckland, etc., etc. People travel all over the place. Now, some authorities like West Norfolk, Great Yarmouth, have already got a version of a tariff in place, which we're spending on mitigating the effects of those visitors. But that's a more localised effect. What we're trying to do here is expand that and solve the issue across the county. We are held extremely closely to account, if that's an expression, by Natural England in this regard. And the term likely significant effect is one that is wielded to local planning authorities to make sure that we understand what the effect is and what are we going to do about it. So this is our collective response to that. Now, it would have been really great, and I would have loved to have come along and been able to tell you and give you a presentation for the document. You could all have the document. It isn't completed yet, and one of the reasons for that is the resource commitment that was needed from Natural England to finalise this. They've been very busy with Sizewell C and the implications of that. But through the good offices, Keith Moore, we've been helped to get through some of that, and we, within the next couple of months, will have that final document. But all the elements that I talked about today are complete. The work to understand the mitigation, the analysis of green infrastructure, that is all done. What we're waiting for really is the kind of stamp of approval from Natural England to make sure that we can, with confidence for you all at local planning examinations, to say that this has been agreed and is a sound way of doing it. At the meeting in January, you suggested that perhaps there could be a specific briefing about this subject, because it is quite a large subject. Quite happy to facilitate that. If we could attach it to perhaps one of those the meetings that we've got coming up that Ninan has articulated. We could do it like that, or we could do a special one. That's to be kind of worked out. Come back to the point that Sam made. Does this mean this is all going to be necessary in the future if the system changes? Well, I think I would say probably two things to that. When is the system going to change? Because we're all in the middle of local plan preparation, and we will be asked these awkward questions under the current arrangements. But equally, is the habitat regulation assessment still going to be a requirement? It is a legal requirement at the moment. Now, I know the government has talked about dispensing with sustainability appraisals in their current form. I don't think I read, correct me if I'm wrong, that habitat regulation assessment was something that was going to be put to one side or lessened in any way. So I think this is still an extremely worthwhile piece of work. And we are very closely scrutinised, as everybody will know, by some of the nature conservation organisations. And it's something we will have to prove. Otherwise, we'll have a very sticky time at examinations. I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions.
Well, we're sort of there at the time, so we've reached time rather. I mean, I think you're right. It's all up in the air. It's good stuff. I mean, if we could just limit it to 200 quid, that's fine. But if it's an extra 200 quid per dwelling house, say, and we've been here before, those of us that have done SIL a few years ago, and it turned out, we didn't get that over the inspector's desk in the end. But if it's a marginal one, but if there's just to be a general infrastructure levy and that 200 quid comes out of it, then you're going to be arguing with Graham over what is it green stuff or a school? And meanwhile, the developer's going to say, well, I want the bloody school because I can't sell the houses otherwise. And I think the baton of responsibility is certainly going to be different to what it is at the moment, where you can just lard on bits and pieces. So I think we'll just have to see how this one pans out, I think. Good. Right. There are no questions, and I've given lots of time for questions, and I don't see any hands.
I've put a comment in the box, Chairman.
Oh, comment. Sorry, there you are. Go on, Graham. Yeah, sorry. It's like the Derek and Clive show today.
Apologies. Yeah, it's really quite interesting because as a county and as individual districts, we're promoting the fact that people can come here on holiday, and it's a £3.5 billion industry to make sure that they can be looked after. And part of that is saying that we have a beautiful coastline and beautiful inland waterways and beautiful countryside, and please come and have a look at it and enjoy your holiday here. We have talked about having a levy on tourism, which could have been split between making sure these areas are kept beautiful for that particular purpose, and that the area is kept to a certain standard that would fit your criteria. I think that would be really a wonderful thing to do, because it would be self-perpetuating. But how you would then put it onto houses, and then, as John has just eloquently said, split that between, do you build a school or keep the fields nice and the lanes and all that kind of business. We do have a responsibility to maintain school levels and dedication to a certain standard, and we do have other responsibilities within the county to make sure that people are well looked after. So I don't know if John's description of larding on is quite the way to put it, but certainly
I don't think that's a technical term.
Yeah, it's a technical thing. I know that. I know that goes beyond me, but but it's where you stop larding on and you start using the facilities that are already here. Because if we're attracting a £3.5 billion industry into the county already, and we're describing our county as the most beautiful place to come and visit, but we're also saying it's a beautiful place to come and live, and we're giving government a certain amount of housing to build a year, then we definitely need to make this all meld together somehow, to make sure that if you're coming on holiday, you've got a beautiful place. If you're coming to live, you've got a beautiful place, and it's a safe place to live. And we've got the environmental issues of rising water and heavy rain and God knows what else as well. All these things that we take into account on our day-to-day, if all of a sudden there's not a duty to cooperate between the different authorities, we're going to have a problem. Because those certain elements are not going to be picked up in a planning application or in a development of a holiday resort or or anything else. It's just going to be particular to that little bit of area and not in the county as a whole, and that is an issue.
It depends, though, doesn't it? Because if the requirement is still there to prove that there's no likely significant effect on these habitats, then somehow we have to prove that. There's a couple of ways of doing that. You can do it jointly, or
Prove
you
it to
can
who?
do it to prove to Natural England if there's still a legal requirement. Now, if there isn't, I agree, Graham, it's a completely different situation. The point, though, about people coming to visit, we are not intending to charge those people directly for coming. This is about the growth generated within Norfolk by Norfolk local planning authorities, complying with government figure. It's not a charge on every visitor coming, but it is to prove the impact of what is happening, the new growth is not detrimental to those habitats. So there's a kind of subtlety there. But you're quite right. All of those people who come, should they be charged? Well, possibly not. Those are kind of political decisions, as are what do you spend the money on. If you collect a tariff through a local infrastructure tax, and you have to spend it on schools and roads and all the other things that are competing, education. How do you do that? Well, that's over to you as politicians. You can make those difficult choices to spend money on one thing and not another. But the important thing is that there is a mechanism to do that. And if that legal constraint still applies, then we have to help you to fulfill that.
Okay. I think that's a full answer there. Alan, I'm conscious of the time. We're 9 minutes over, so if you don't mind, we'll just move on to the next one. But I think that's a good batting around. You posed the question to us, should we have a presentation later on? If we're going to slot in an extra bonus meeting before Christmas, perhaps that's the moment when we might be able to do that, and we can consider all the responses that we've put in. But certainly I think your presentation helps us inform the responses we may put into the white paper. There's an unintended consequence there, I think, that's going to smack us in the face. Good. Okay, let's move on, if we may, to agenda item number 8. Trevor, I'm afraid we've run over a little bit, so if you want to sort of rattle through, if you can, that would be good. And I think I've stolen your thunder anyway by suggesting there's going to be an extra meeting. It's one of the recommendations. That should have saved you 2 minutes. Over to you, Trevor.
John, can I just chip in? I'm just going to update. We're not complete overtime because Cameron Clow, because he originally thought the meeting would be shortened, I have told him not to attend this meeting. So
Fantastic.
We have got some additional minutes.
Thanks for that, Nina. Well, good. So we'll note that. And Trevor, crack on and perhaps do this one with the budget all together, 8 and 9 together.
Okay, well, I was going to go through the first one briefly first, just to make sure everyone was happy with that. Just go over the NSPF and what we're planning to do with that. So I'll just quickly take that, and then it might be useful just if there's any questions, just to cover those. What I'm going to do is just tell you where we are with the work programme. Obviously, there's been some significant challenges since we last met with the coronavirus and the impact that's had on officer availability. But also the white paper has had a very big impact. So we've obviously had to review the current work programme, particularly around the production of the next version of the NSPF. We had planned version 3 to be a more substantial update, but it's clear now that some authorities are planning to expedite their local plan process and look to bring it forward before any changes that are proposed in the white paper are brought into force. So in order to do that, we are going to continue to update the NSPF, but what we plan to do is take a much lighter approach to the updates, and we're proposing not to hold a public consultation on the changes this time as well. So the changes that we'll include are updates which are related to the joint work that we're currently got underway, and also to ensure the NSPF is up to date, so it's in a good place for anyone that is planning to submit their local plans under the existing system. Most of the joint working is either complete or near to completion anyway, and all the work we are doing is still useful for the local plan process, so there's no plans to stop any of the work that we currently have underway. In terms of the individual work streams, well, Alan's told us where we are with the GI and RAMS work. The elderly study that we're doing, we're just waiting for the final report for that to be produced, and that work will be complete. The climate change group is also just finalising their recommendations that they will put forward to this group. The telecoms work is complete as well. So we should be able to report back on everything at the next member forum, and hopefully everything should be complete by that point. Because of the timescales of local plans and to fit in with any that are being brought forward under the existing system, we're proposing to hold an additional member forum, which you've already touched upon. It would probably be in early December. That's just the only thing different to what was said earlier. And the focus of that would be on reviewing the outputs of all the work streams that we've got underway at the moment, and go through all the recommendations that we'd like to put forward into the new version of the NSPF, and reviewing all the changes in the new version of the document as well. So just to highlight the way the process would work to make sure that we end with a new version of the NSPF that can be used for the duty to cooperate for anyone going through for the local plan process as it currently stands. As I say, we'll have a new version of the document ready for review at a member forum in early December. We'll obviously take on board any changes and feedback that we get from that forum. And then in our regular forum in January, we will look to present a new version of the document, and hopefully at that point, that version can then be taken back by each authority for endorsement. That means that we should have a new version of the NSPF ready February, March time next year. So before I move on, is there any questions about the approach that I've set out?
I can't see any questions. I think we just need to say that, clearly, insofar as the Greater Norwich authorities, we're working towards doing a Reg 19 under the transition agreement, but whether we actually get there or not is still to be decided. There's quite a lot of work to be done.
Yes, but there are some other authorities
as a precaution. Yeah, as a precaution, though, making a start doesn't seem unreasonable.
Yeah. No,
okay. And Mark Ashwell, did you want to come in, Mark? You just wanted to make a point about Teachers Cooperate. I think, you make a good point. We'll still need a mechanism to keep together.
And this is related to my next paper, really, which is the sort of going forward, what we do going forward. So shall I plough on with that?
Crack on. Let's make the time up.
Yep. Okay. So it's already been highlighted at the meeting that the planning white paper proposes to abolish the duty to cooperate. However, it should be highlighted that the paper also specifies that the government is giving further considerations to the way in which strategic cross-boundary issues can be adequately planned for. And there's certainly been some focus on the lack of strategic planning within the document. So I think it's likely that there'll be some sort of requirements around strategic planning and cross-boundary issues going forward. Obviously, whether the NSPF would fit the bill for that is yet to be seen. However, what we should do is note the other benefits that we've gained from the process of joint working. For the contribution of £10,000 from each authority for this year, we've delivered a GI RAM study, we'll have delivered an elderly study, we'll have delivered telecoms work, the climate change work. There's a host of benefits from that closer joint working. Not to mention the fact that, and Sam touched upon this, we also have to work with other public bodies like the Environment Agency, Natural England, and also Anglian Water, and our neighbouring counties as well, like Suffolk. So all of this is sort of picked up under this joint working. The other big thing that we've tried to do is improve our engagement with the various NHS systems, and I think that's particularly important to continue that work as well, given the coronavirus, and as the CCG, the combined CCG as it is now, transitions into an integrated care system. So again, that's another important piece of work that we want to consider continuing. The costs of doing all this work would have been considerably higher than the £10,000 contribution that each has paid as well. We touched upon the new standard methodology. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with that, but if there is a considerable increase in the number of homes that we have to deliver across Norfolk, I think that will in itself be another reason for continuing joint working to understand how they can be delivered. So based on the current position, obviously there's still a lot of unknowns, but there are some work streams that we're proposing to take forward into the next financial year. I think the most significant of those is the Norfolk Design Charter or Design Code or Design Guide. So Sam already touched upon the fact that there's a bigger emphasis now on this in the government proposals, and there's an opportunity for us to work together on this to produce a county-wide charter or guide. Suffolk are in the process of completing a similar exercise. And maybe when we get an update from them, we can understand how that process worked. We can certainly learn a lot from their experience in the process. But I think it presents an opportunity to save significantly over costs of creating potentially 6 separate design guides. And a standardised approach would really help developers to ensure that there is a consistent approach across the country if you've got a developer that works across different districts of the county. I think the design guide also gives us opportunities to push climate change processes forward. It can be simple things around energy saving designs, like the orientation of buildings to catch more sun, things like that. And the other thing as well is it gives us the opportunity to improve healthy living and lifestyles, which again is particularly important because of the impacts of the coronavirus. So the first steps on that would be to create a brief to define how far a joint approach could go. And what we'd need to do as well is look at the other design work that's going on across the county already and make sure that we have a joined up approach to that. It's also important that we have significant input from the community and other stakeholders. So we've allowed some budget for external support to support this work. Alan touched upon the GI RAMS work. Another piece of work that we might need to take forward, if we do take a county-wide tariff forward, we will need to set up a collection and management process to deal with things like staff, for rangers to be employed. And this whole process will need to be created and agreed with members and then implemented. So again, there's a significant piece of work to take forward there. There are a number of other streams that I mentioned in my report. I touched upon the HELA methodology being old and out of date. And I think at the moment we're at risk from challenges from developers. If we don't update that going forward, it's only in line with the old version of the MPPF. So certainly we could do is looking at that again. Something I didn't mention in my report, but which has been discussed quite recently, is the need to revisit the health protocol. I mentioned about some of the changes that the health bodies are going through at the moment, and I think we need to reassess the health protocol to make sure the engagement that we have with them is still appropriate and done in the appropriate ways. There's also the possibility that we can identify other cost savings by doing some work jointly. The habitat regulations were talked about and the biodiversity net gain. There's also a number of things that was interesting to hear come up earlier about the bringing development forward. We looked at that before, so there's opportunities to perhaps look at something around that as well. One final work stream I just wanted to touch upon, though, was as we talked about before, the standard methodology could present some challenges in terms of the number of homes we need to deliver in Norfolk. So one work stream that we're proposing is to look at a county-wide approach to a new settlement. And this would be a useful way of looking at any additional housing need which might be required across the county. Because finding, certainly under the proposed method, finding 2,000 new homes a year using existing towns and villages, I'm sure would be very challenging. So there's significant work here, and it's proposed that we continue with the existing arrangements and contributions from each authority of £10,000 per year from each district and half for the Broads. Clearly, the position will need to be reviewed again this time next year. And I'll also highlight that some of the work including things like the design guide, may well take more than 12 months to put in place. Also, further information may come out from the government in terms of the working arrangements, and if we do need to create a version of the NSPF to bring it in line with any new sort of requirements around strategic planning, then obviously we'll need to take that into account and plan for that as well. So I'd like to understand if there is county-wide support for keeping the existing arrangements in place and for each of the projects I proposed as well.
Okay, so who wants to ask that question then? And I can't see who it is yet.
Can I just ask a question, Chairman?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, go ahead.
You just mentioned a new town, new development, new village, whatever. In our local plans, we can only, as local councils, we can only look in our own area. We put forward our local development plan and we're allocated a number and we have to find that number within our local plans. If you're looking at a county-wide strategic planning framework, where if you build a new town, it takes away the need from the existing towns, as you just described, the need to build so many in the existing towns, is there a mechanism for that? Because I haven't seen it.
Well, what we would need to do is we would come up with a county-wide approach which we can put into the framework, and then that can be taken forward into each local plan. So effectively you would say, if we agreed to put a new town, for argument's sake, somewhere along the A11, we can refer to that within the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework or any kind of replacement. And that can then be taken forward as part of local plans. So you could identify the need to reduce numbers because this piece of work is being done. So, you know, it was just a case of putting that one forward as an idea for discussion to see if it would be something that would be useful for officers to get together and potentially look at the options around a sort of new plan, a new town for the county.
I think that's one that needs officers to get together, see how it actually works in practice. It would be useful for members to understand. And just one other question, Chairman, if you indulge me.
Of course, you go ahead.
The governance around all this, is this going to be organised through this particular forum, or is there an officer forum as well? What's going to govern how this is all going to work?
We would look to keep the existing arrangements in place. So obviously, and it is set out in the current Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework. So obviously, at the top of the framework, we have this member forum, and underneath that sits the Norfolk Strategic Planning Strategic Planning Officers Group. That meets on a monthly basis and reviews work that is going on and makes proposals to bring forward to this meeting. And then under that, we have various subgroups which look specifically at the topics. Obviously, the ones we have on the go at the moment we've mentioned, and we have a subgroup for each of those at the moment, which meets regularly to review progress and produce reports for the officer group.
Thank you.
I think, Graham, setting the position of a new town will not be our responsibility. It'll certainly be the responsibility of the planning authority concerned. It is potentially one of the largest and most significant public sector decisions we would ever take by any council in the whole county since the war. They're setting up a brand new.
I totally agree with you, John. The point being made was, though, that if we build a new town, then we can take off some of the allocation to our districts. That's the point I was trying to make.
Good point. Well, look, we can do some very basic work on this, but let's not think that this body, which is not a decision-making body, would usurp the proper procedures there. We're just going to collect the evidence. If we provide the bullets, others can fire them. Good. So, but is that generally endorsed as a principle? I don't see anyone declining from that. So good. Thank you for that. So can I just formally ask, is there any objections, negatively if you like, that we propose to our host authorities, we pay the 10 grand, whilst I think the county pulls a fast one on this, they aren't a planning authority and Neenan gets thrown in for the ride, so the county contributes to her cost and the Broads Authority in for 5k. Does anyone object to that, which is the main proposal? No one's put in the chat. No one's put their hand up. I'm going to take that as assent. Thank you. Right, local plan update. Who's doing this? We're catching up for some time. We're 3 minutes behind, so that's good. Who's gonna? Mark, you haven't said very much this time. Why don't you lead us through the local plans update? You normally do. Has he gone?
Chairman, I think this is the opportunity for individual authorities to speak up and tell us what's going on if they wish to.
Okay, so there's a paper before us. I mean, it's really just for noting, I think. On that basis, we'll just note it. No one else has indicated. Good. So now we've caught up. We're 5 minutes ahead now, 7 minutes ahead. So AOB dates for next forum. I think we spoilt that one because Trevor told us it's going to be sort of in the first week of December, didn't he? Nina, to you project manage this.
Yeah, no, I can canvass a date in your calendar and then share that out with everyone, and then we can get that booked in the diary in early December.
Perfect. We'll do that. Thanks, guys. That brings, I think it brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you to those people who are here, and also I think we've got Keith Moore from the Environment Agency. Robin, do you want to turn your camera on? Did you enjoy that?
I did. Yes, thank you. Yeah, very interesting.
Good. Yeah, good. That's fine. And I thought, Mike, hopefully you managed to sort out your connection problems as well. We saw you coming in and out, and we sympathised with you. That's the end of the meeting. Thanks very much indeed. I will click leave, and I hope you all do likewise. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Bye bye now.
Nino.